Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our December 10th Active Transportation Program Central Workshop. I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Um, so, uh, yeah, welcome everyone. I'm gonna pass it right over to Jaden to start with some logistics and to kick us off.
Thanks, Anya. All right, folks, good morning and welcome to the 8th Cycle 8 Central Workshop. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our workshops can take place in diverse locations around the state so that commissioners and staff can hear directly from our stakeholders around California. The workshop agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov. Live closed captioning is available on this webinar. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there to choose from. Any document the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov and we'll have them returned to you as quickly as possible. For all of our workshops, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout this workshop. We will stop periodically throughout this workshop to address stakeholder questions. You should see the webinar control panel likely located on the bottom of your screen. There, you will find the Raise Hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the Raise Hand feature as soon as we reach the item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Commission staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Once you have been unmuted, please make sure to state your name and agency you are representing. Alternately, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question. Commission staff will read that on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Please do your best to be concise. Please make sure your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. If you face any technical issues, please reach out through the Q&A or question tab, and I will do my best to assist you. Thank you for joining us today. Next, I would like to go over some workshop principles. So be respectful of other viewpoints. Please keep in mind, this is a statewide program, so remember that we serve a large variety of applicants. And please propose your ideas in a public setting so we can discuss that together. So for today's workshop agenda, we will do a brief program overview. We'll recap our previous workshop. We'll go into the 2027 ATP application questions, as well as a presentation on updates to the count guide. Additionally, we'll continue with the clarify and reduce redundancy updates. We'll also go over new sections. We will conclude our mid-cycle fund estimate discussion. And our last discussion was started November 19th, and we'll close out with action items. So I would like to provide a brief overview of the Active Transportation Program for new people on the line. Maybe this is your first time at a workshop. So the ATP funds projects that encourage increased use of active modes of transportation, such as walking and biking. Based on our funding, we are a reimbursement program with state and federal funds, and we approximately have about $550 million for 4 years. Cycle 8 will begin in fiscal year 27-28 and conclude in 2030-2031. There's a wide list of eligible applicants, including local, regional, and state agencies, tribal governments, public schools or school districts, to name a few. So our distribution of funds are tied up in statute, so we have to distribute these funds 50% to the statewide component, 10% to the small urban and rural component, as well as 40% to the MPO component. For eligible projects, there are several types. We do fund infrastructure projects, which are capital projects that further the goals of the program. We also have non-infrastructure projects that are typically seen as education and encouragement programs that also further the goals of the program. We also fund plans, which will develop a community-wide bicycle, pedestrian, safe routes to school, or active transportation plan that encompass a disadvantaged community. And lastly, we have combination projects, which is when you pair an infrastructure component with a non-infrastructure component. So an overview of the ATP from cycles 1 through cycle 7. So to date, we have about 1,200 projects programmed for almost $4 billion in ATP funds since cycle 1. We've allocated almost $2 billion as of fiscal year 24-25, and these projects have a total project cost valued at over $7.4 billion. Moving on to discuss our cycle 8 engagement, we have a wide variety of engagement opportunities. The first one you'll see listed here are the central workshops. This is the 8th one we've conducted this cycle. Our next one will be in January. And these workshops are really an opportunity for CTC staff to meet with our stakeholders, to discuss potential changes to guidelines, the rubrics, the application, and get feedback directly from our stakeholders. Next, we have our branch workshops, which are opportunities for CTC staff to meet with agencies to provide an educational opportunity, potentially for folks who are new to the program, who really need an ATP, 101 lesson. These are often paired with site visits, and we'll give you an analysis. If you have submitted previously, we'll analyze your performance in the ATP and give you some feedback there. The request period to schedule a branch workshop did close October 31st, 2025, and we are still in the process of putting together the schedule, but these branch workshops will likely be held, January, February, and early March, and we will reach out to you shortly. Next, we have our site visits, and the site visits are ongoing. You can register for a site visit until our call for projects, which will happen in March. And site visits are a great opportunity to present a potential application to the CTC staff. We'll give you feedback, let you know if it's a good fit for the program, and it's a great opportunity to, really develop your application before you submit it. Lastly, we have our application debriefs. These are ongoing as well. And application debriefs is a great opportunity to reach out to CTC staff. We can let you know how you did on a previous application. We'll walk you through your consensus form and give you constructive criticism on where things went right, where things went wrong, and how the application could be improved in a future submittal. All right, next I just want to provide a very brief workshop recap from our previous workshop, November 19th. So I believe this needs to be updated. Our last workshop was the December 4th workshop, and that was the PSR equivalency workshop. That is where we had Caltrans on the line, and we went over in great detail the project study report equivalency. That information can be found on the CTC's website. We do have our recording available, as well as the presentation. And next, I will turn it back. Oh.
Yeah. So Jaden, the this is the recap from the last central workshop that we had. And we didn't do a recap at our December 4th workshop.
Thank you for
So
that. Gotcha. Thank you for that reminder, Anya. So,
sure.
yeah. So going back over to the November 19th workshop, yeah, because unfortunately, as Anya said, we did not have time to cover that at our previous workshop. So during the November 19th workshop, we went over a new section, which was part 6, looking at the MPO component, several sections within there. We also continued our clarified and simplified language updates in part 8, looking at project delivery. And we also went over stakeholder suggestions for a new process, which did include the mid-cycle fund estimate, which we are hoping to continue that discussion today. And I believe I will turn over to Alika to go over the 2027 ATP application.
Yeah, thank you, Jaden. Okay, good morning, everyone. So today we wanted to start dabbling in the 2027 ATP applications. I just wanted to provide a quick overview before I kind of jump into everything here today. So last cycle was the first time we utilized the submittable platform for the ATP applications. We held a training session to go over how to use the platform. So I wanted to take a second before I really jump into all the application stuff to circle back with this group to see if that is something folks would still be interested in going into cycle 8. So I prepared a poll that I'm going to launch. I'll give everyone a minute or two to respond to this. This will be helpful for us. Okay, seeing a lot of yeses is great. Give it another few seconds here. Okay. It looks like a good amount of folks have responded to this poll, and the overwhelming response is yes, which we assumed, but we just wanted to confirm. Okay, great. So go ahead and end the poll now. Thank you all for your participation. So we will let you all know more about the training going into next year. We'll probably have more details ready for you at the January workshop. Okay, so for the ATP applications, Jaden, could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. I wanted to go over I wanted to provide an overview of the application changes for cycle 8. So overall, we want to continue aligning the application with the changes that we've made to the guidelines. So that includes adding a new unscored question to Part A4 of the application, and this is the project details where you identify your specific improvements. And this is being added to capture new legislation on Class 3 bike routes and sharrows. So again, this will not be scored. This is an informative question. And then we also want to remove any sort of outdated information from the application, such as the Justice 40 requirements, and you will see a little bit of that here today. We want to continue aligning the application with the scoring rubrics. And so we did that a lot last cycle. We just want to continue that effort and really fine tune everything for you all. And we really focused this cycle on clarifying the language. So this kind of ties into several cycles of on work on the commission staff's behalf. So we've done a lot of site visits and application debriefs across the years, and we've made mental notes of areas where enough applicants are missing parts of the question prompts, or they're not completely addressing the questions as intended. And so for this reason, going into cycle 8, we wanted to provide more context on reformatting of the questions, just to make it very clear. Besides 3 questions, you really won't see anything new. Everything is pulled from the scoring rubric. So this language that, if you see updated language, it's actually verbatim pulled from the scoring rubrics. There are 3 application questions, as I mentioned, where we're adding somewhat new prompts. And this is to the public participation in planning, context-sensitive, and transformative projects. It's new language, but it's really just elaborating on the question. So it's nothing totally new that you'll have to address. Again, we're really focusing this cycle on not making any changes to the application questions. We just want to clarify language and make things easier for all of our applicants. And we want to help you get the most amount of points on each question. We're also going to be incorporating feedback that we received from our applicants and evaluators on the submittable application. So we're still in the works on that, but we want to continue that effort, and we'll be providing more specifics on that at the January guidelines or application workshop. And then we're also still hoping and working to shorten the submittable application format. So in terms of today, our goal is to discuss Part B, which is the narrative questions for the infrastructure and the combination application. So that means the large, medium, and small infrastructure only, or large, medium, and small infrastructure with a non-infrastructure component. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before I jump into any questions, I wanted to kind of share this. It provides an overview of all of the applications as well as all of the questions that each application scores on. So you'll see we have the large, medium, and small infrastructure and infrastructure with a non-infrastructure component. We also have plans and the non-infrastructure only. Next slide, please. Okay, jumping into the narrative questions. Next slide. Okay, question 1. This is the disadvantaged communities question. And this part that I'll be talking about right now is applicable to all of the application types. So all of the infrastructure, combination, non-infrastructure only, and plan applications. So we talked about this in our previous workshops. We included in Cycle 7 2 federal tools. That's the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, as well as the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer as disadvantaged community qualifiers. Because these federal tools are no longer available, these will be removed from the application. Next slide, please. Okay, so jumping into part C of question 1, which is focused on the direct benefit, there are 2 prompts for this part of the question. This is the first part. So you'll see on my slides throughout this presentation, I'll have the existing language as it currently stands in the application, and I have included the updated format or the updated language on the bottom, so you can clearly see what's been changed. And if we have made changes to the language, that's included in bold, underline, in red font. So it's very, very clear. Okay, so for all infrastructure and combination application types, we just updated the format of this question. Previously, it was all 1 sentence. Now we broke it up into 2 sentences, and we rearranged the format of the question. So at the top, it'll ask right away, describe how the improvements meet an important need of the disadvantaged community, explain how the project closes a gap, provides a connection to, and or addresses a deficiency in an active transportation network. The word limit is exactly the same. The expectation for responses remains the same. We just updated the format of this question. Next slide, please. Moving on to the second prompt under part C. Again, we updated the format of this. We noted during our discussion with applicants that enough of them were forgetting to address any issues of displacement that are taking place in their communities. And so what we decided to do for Cycle 8 was to break out this prompt into a separate short response field. So you will have a separate required space to address this question, and therefore it will not be missed by our applicants. Just as before, we're not expecting an essay in response to this part of the question. You'll see that the word limit is 200. Same as before, we're just reformatting to ensure that this part of this question is not missed. I'll take a pause here to see if there are any questions from the group. Okay, not seeing any, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, great. So question 2 is the need question, or the potential to increase walking and biking. For all of the infrastructure and combination application types, Part A, you'll see the existing language included at the top. What we updated was, again, just providing clarification on the expectations for this response, for responses to this question. So the updated question will now read, describe the community context and the issues that this project will address to increase walking and biking and induced mode shift. How will the proposed project benefit the non-motorized users of all ages and varying abilities? Consider children, older adults, students, working professionals, and persons with disabilities. What is the project's desired outcome, and how will the project best deliver that outcome? So just providing clarifying language here. I'll take a pause before I move on to part B. See if there are any questions or comments. Okay, not seeing any come in. We can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is only specific to the large infrastructure and combination application types. The way that B is organized in the large application, you are offered 4 categories to identify and describe how your project is going to address the active transportation needs in your community. So you have your project will close a gap, it'll create a new route, it'll remove a barrier, or it'll add improvements to other existing routes. The way the large application is structured for this part of the question, if you select a category, you are asked to provide additional details or more, there may or may not be an additional prompt for you to respond to. But at the end of each of these categories, the same question was posed. And so we felt that that was a bit redundant, and we wanted to mirror what we have in the medium and the small application. And so what we are proposing is to pull this question out from each of the categories because it's exactly the same, and instead it'll be posed at the very end of part B. And so the only addition to the language of the question is considering each category selected or category selected, describe how the project links, connects to, or encourages the use of existing routes to important or community identified destinations where an increase in active transportation modes can be realized. And it goes on to provide some examples of important destinations. So because we pull this out from each of those categories, initially, or the way it currently stands in the application, each prompt was provided a 150 word limit. So we added all that up. It comes out to about 600 words. So that's what we are proposing for the large application, is to pull it out, provide a 600 word limit. That way you are addressing all of the categories in one field instead of under each category. I wanted to take a pause here specifically because this is the bigger format and format change that we're proposing today. I wanted to see if folks have any concerns with this new format, if they feel the 600 word count is sufficient. And one other point I wanted to bring up, under each of these 4 categories, you are provided a map attachment so that you can showcase where your project is closing a gap, where your project is creating a new route, and et cetera. However, we've noticed across the cycles, a lot of applicants tend to include the same exact map under each of these 4 categories. So another question I want you all to kind of think about and consider is, do we want one map attachment for all of Part B, or do folks still like having 4 map attachment fields that fall one under each of these categories? So I'll pause here to see if there are any thoughts or concerns on that.
Hey, Alika, looks like there is a question in the Q&A tab from Iman Silvan. They ask, is there a document where the draft application and guidelines are available to preview, not in submittable?
So we do have the application questions from last cycle available on our website. We have the scoring rubrics, and actually the documents are called List of All Application Questions, and it'll break every single part of the question out for you, as well as the entirety of the application, including Part A, which is just your general project information. So that's on our website. In terms of the updated language that we're proposing, as of right now, it's only in the slide form, but this presentation will be posted on our website as well. The draft 2027 ATP guidelines will be available in preparation for the January commission meeting. So once all of that documentation is posted, you will have access to the draft guidelines. I hope that addresses your question, Iman.
Thanks, Alika. We have another comment in the chat from Rebecca Nylon. She says, yes, extra map attachment options, please. Graphics are important to telling the story. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other comments?
Not seeing any at this time.
Okay. We tend to agree with the last comment. The more attachment fields available, the better you have a better shot at showcasing your project that way. So we will go ahead and leave map attachments in the large application under each category. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So in submittable, you'll see the image to the right as an example. The question will be posed, there will be a field for you to fill that out, and then underneath that field, there's grayed out text that provides more context as to what we would like to see discussed in these questions. And so when I'm talking about question footnotes, I just wanted to provide a visual of what that looks like in submittable, and it's that where that green box is located on the right. So we added more details to question 2 and all of the infrastructure application types. Under Part A, we wanted to emphasize, because we noted a lot of applicants were missing this, and these are really easy points for all of our applicants to get when responding to this question. Again, this is called out in the scoring rubric, so we wanted to make this very clear in the application as well. Under Part A, we added, how will students of all ages, including but not limited to K through 12 and college university, use and have access to this project? Discussion of students is not limited to safe routes to school projects. And under Part B, in the question footnotes, we included, will the project increase the proportion of student trips accomplished by active transportation? Again, discussion of students is not limited to safe routes to school projects. So we wanted to include these again to ensure that our applicants are addressing every part of every question. This is called out specifically in the scoring rubric, but for applicants who don't utilize the scoring rubric as they're writing the applications, they may miss it if they're not reading clearly through all of the application narrative response requirements. And so we wanted to make this very clear and ensure that our applicants are receiving the potential 2 points under Part A and the additional 1 point in Part B by addressing the active transportation needs of students. Next slide, please. Okay, next we are jumping into the safety question. This is specific to all of the infrastructure and combination application types. Okay, so Part A is where our applicants are asked to provide at least one attachment field, one is required and the other is optional, where they are providing supporting documentation, whether that's the TIMS collision data, any sort of heat maps, or any other information or data documentation that they want to provide to support why this project is a safety priority in their community. So we ended up updating language just to provide more clarification on what we want addressed in this question. All of this language, again, has been pulled from the scoring rubric. So you'll see the updated language states, referencing the project area, collision, summaries, and data provided in sub-questions 1 and 2, which are the attachment fields. I included sub-questions instead of just stating questions for new applicants. I didn't want anyone talking about the need or disadvantaged communities under this section if it wasn't pertinent to what they wanted to convey in their response. And so we provided that minor clarification. The question continues, provide an analysis of the past collision data to identify the specific crash type trends that will likely occur in the future if no action is taken. Discuss the extent to which the proposed project limits represents one of the agency's top priorities for addressing ongoing safety, and discuss how the proposed safety improvements correspond to the types and locations of the past collisions. And then we added, consider the safety threats to vulnerable and underserved communities, including disadvantaged communities if applicable, children, students, older adults, and persons with disabilities in your response. So again, this is just providing more context for you all so that you're hopefully receiving the most points possible under this part of the question. Next slide, please. Under the question footnote, we just provided additional details on the influence area guidance. This is all included in the scoring rubric, but again, we just wanted to include this guidance for those who don't utilize the scoring rubric, which we highly recommend all of our applicants do. But in the event that you don't, we wanted to make sure that this guidance was provided to you through the application as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at Part B, again, this is for all of the infrastructure and combination application types. Part B is where you're talking specifically about your proposed improvements and how they're going to address the safety concerns that you talked about in Part A. And so we wanted to add more inclusive language to capture all active transportation users. And the reason we're doing this is as part of the guidelines process, we share the draft guidelines with our Interagency Equity Advisory Committee. And so when we did that for Cycle 8, we received feedback from a member that the language in our guidelines and application questions isn't very inclusive to all active transportation users because not every community member is going to be walking and biking. And so you'll see in this question, a little bit of that inclusive language added. You'll see it more in the public participation and planning, the context-sensitive question, which is in the large and medium applications, and the transformative projects question, which is in the large application. So we added to this question, describe how the project improvements will remedy one or more potential safety hazards that contribute to active transportation users, including walking, biking, and rolling, injuries, or fatalities. Referencing the information provided in Part A, demonstrate how the proposed countermeasures directly address the underlying factors that are contributing to the occurrence of active transportation user collisions. I will take a pause here to see if there are any questions from the group before I move on to the public participation and planning question. Okay. Doesn't sound like we received anything. So Jaden, can you advance to the next slide, please? Great, thank you. Okay. So for public participation in planning, this question is structured differently across the 3 infrastructure and combination applications. With the large applications, because they are more, they're larger projects, we want more context and more discussion as to how the community was involved in the process and ultimately how the agency involved them in the planning of this project. And so this slide here is specific to the large infrastructure and combination applications only. The question poses, what is or was the process of defining future policies, goals, investments, and designs to prepare for future needs of users of this project? How did the applicant analyze the wide range of alternatives and impacts to the transportation system to influence beneficial outcomes? So to this question, we are proposing to add, did the alternatives take the wide range of active transportation users into consideration? An example, children, older adults, wheelchair users, and people with visual impairments. So it's not totally a new prompt. We're just kind of emphasizing this as part of the question. It was already something that applicants were asked to talk about, but we're emphasizing all active transportation users, and we want to make sure that those folks have been taken into consideration. So we can go to the next slide because the next one is for medium, and it's the same exact proposal. The question, the existing language was a little different from the large infrastructure application. However, the addition to this part of the question is exactly the same as what we went over. So we're adding, did the alternatives take the wide range of active transportation users into consideration? So I will pause to see if there are any comments or questions.
Hey, Alika, not seeing any questions at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jaden. Next slide, please. Okay. The next question is the context-sensitive bikeways and walkways and innovative elements. This question is only included in the large and medium infrastructure and combination application types. We are proposing to add to the existing language, describe how the recognized best solutions included consideration of children, older adults, and persons with disabilities to walk, bike, and roll safely to key destinations. So that was the prompt that we added, and I'm realizing now that that should be a period at the end and not a question mark, so I will update that. But other than that, are there any comments or questions from the group regarding this addition?
Yeah, not seeing any questions at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jaden. Next slide, please. Okay, and the last slide I wanted to go over is the transformative projects question. So this question is only in the large infrastructure and combination application types. The existing language asks, describe how your project will transform the non-motorized environment. There are a lot of items that are included in the question footnotes that we want our applicants to discuss. We wanted to add inclusive language here, so we are proposing to include how will the project encourage vulnerable users, an example, children, older adults, and persons with disabilities to walk, bike, and roll. And again, I will take a pause here to see if there are any questions or comments.
wait and see if any comments roll in, but I don't see any at this time.
Okay. So this is actually the final application question that we wanted to discuss today. I thought that there would be a little bit more discussion, but that's okay. Maybe folks haven't had their coffee yet. That's totally fine. If you look over these slides later and have any questions or any sort of feedback for us, please let us know. And we will address those at the January workshop. Our next workshop is scheduled as I just mentioned, January 2026. So we'll continue to discuss the applications. We'll finish up with the plan and non-infrastructure only applications, and we'll talk more about Part A, which is the general project details, and that'll be across all of the ATP applications. So if there aren't any questions, comments, feedback from the group, I wanted to hand things over to Julia Griswold, who will be providing a brief presentation on the updates to the count methodology guide. Anya, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I was just, Jaden, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I was just going to offer a little introduction to this part of our workshop. So, Caltrans has been working with Julia Griswold and her team at the University of Berkeley, California, Berkeley, to update our count methodology guide. As all of you know, the performance metrics that are required from each awarded project is to provide user counts at different times of your project during delivery and after it's been completed. So these have been updated, and we've asked Julia to come today to give you a presentation on the updates, and we're hoping to get your feedback on what she's presenting. And then at probably at our January workshop, we'll revisit this in terms of solidifying the policy for providing user counts in our guidelines. So wanted to give that little bit of context as an introduction, and I'll turn it over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Anya. I see a question in the Q&A that might be for Alika, so I was wondering if someone wanted to answer that before I proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. So we did have a comment from Mike Pickford. He asked, have you received feedback from traffic engineers who might be hesitant to describe likely collisions, etc., with no project?
Sorry, I wanted to reread the question. I'm not sure I totally understand, Mike. Would you mind coming off mute to provide more context?
Sorry, I was trying to type quickly at the end there.
Oh, no, that's
I was just imagining a scenario where a traffic engineer might feel like by uh, thinking about future collisions that might occur without the project that they are hoping to fund with ATP, that could be considered opening themselves up to liability, admitting there's a safety issue. I'm not saying that's the right way to think about it, but I've heard things like that in the past.
Oh, interesting. I don't think that's ever been raised to me before. Actually, yeah, I don't think this concern has ever been raised to me. I don't know, Lori or Anya, if you guys have heard anything of that sort, or maybe Teresa. So the way that the question is posed, we're really looking for details on why your project is a safety priority. And I don't really know, Anya, how, I don't know, this is a tough question. I'm just gonna ask for help.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I agree with what you've said. I've not heard this before, and um, I think, when traffic collisions are referenced on a road, uh, that is not going to have any, improvements or a project. It's usually to support the improvements on a road that could potentially be be safer because there are collisions on that road and it may not be safe to put bike or pedestrian infrastructure on that road. So I've only seen that type of information included in our applications in that context, just to support where the improvements are being made. But yeah, I've not heard um, any concerns about liability. Yeah.
If you haven't heard it, then hopefully it's not a issue that we should spend more time on, but thank you.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and it looks like Rebecca provided some context that she's had that concern at the local level as well. She put if agencies on the fix if document a known issue. Lori, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was just curious, maybe what our Caltrans friends think about the question, because I I have heard this before, not in relation to the ATP, but I mean, I think that could come up on any project, because when you're doing a project, you have to justify why you're doing it, you know? Um, so I, I don't know. I don't know how Caltrans would handle that typically, or if they even know.
Hi, it's Teresa McWilliam. I will say, at the our ATP symposium in Davis this last year, the question was asked to Caltrans because there was a presentation about what Caltrans is doing for non-motorized, and the question was, why won't you share your data? And the answer was because we don't want to open up lawsuits. So it's out there. People are thinking about it, but SafeTrack data is already out there. So anyone that's had a situation can go and look at the data. So acknowledging it and trying to get funding for it, hopefully, is not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Teresa.
Yeah, this is Allie. I was going to make the same exact comment, Teresa, so I'm glad that you mentioned it. Yeah. Um, but it's a really great question, and I think something that we can think about a little bit more. So thank you for bringing it up.
All right. Thank you, team. And the last comment here for Alika was from Evan Kindler. He says, "Thank you. This was very helpful."
Oh, of course. Thank you, Evan.
And that addresses all of our questions and comments. Thank you.
Great. So maybe we can go to the next slide. So yeah, I'm here today to talk a little bit about the ATP count methodology guidance. And I think Anya mentioned that user counts serve as a project performance metric for the ATP, and they are required for all ATP funded projects except for plans. And so Caltrans established interim count guidance, I believe it was in 2019, that set requirements for the data collection. And so for infrastructure projects, it defined the types of counts, either automated or manual. This is for bikes and PEDs specifically. The duration of those counts, the number of locations, and when those counts should be conducted during the project lifetime. And it also included calculation processes for how to estimate the annual average daily traffic for pedestrians and bicyclists using expansion factor methods and expansion factors from other resources. And then had a method for estimating project volumes based on the set of count location data from count locations that you have. Additionally, there was data collection for non-infrastructure projects, including safe routes to school and community-wide or jurisdiction-wide non-infrastructure projects. So next slide. So I'm here talking today because I'm leading a project for Caltrans to develop the California Active Transportation Data Portal. And this is a clearinghouse for active transportation count data. And as part of that project, I've been tasked with conducting stakeholder engagement related to counts and updating this count guidance. So as part of that stakeholder engagement, we conducted an online survey on count practices throughout the state. We conducted stakeholder interviews with select survey respondents from the survey, and then we've consulted with technical advisory committees for our CAD data portal project TAC and the active transportation program TAC. And so various feedback came in on this. I would say the primary things we learned were that these annual average daily traffic estimates are difficult to calculate, and that the school tallies for the Safe Routes to School projects are onerous because that's for all classrooms in a school. So for the next slide. So this is our proposed count requirements. And we have defined them for infrastructure, safe routes to school, non-infrastructure, and these other community-wide or jurisdiction-wide non-infrastructure projects. For the infrastructure projects, you either need to conduct counts at 1, 2, or 3 locations based on the size of the project, and that is defined based on the budget of the project within the guidelines. And then we are asking for manual count from video as that's the primary recommended method for counts. And then an alternative method is to conduct automated counts using tubes, infrared, video, or LiDAR analytics, any of these methods with validation. And then the duration for that is 1 week or 7 continuous days at each location. So for safe routes, the recommended is still to conduct the student travel tallies in each classroom. But as an alternative method, it's also possible to conduct counts at the school locations. I think maybe we still need to establish clarity on how many counts are required for multiple school projects. So welcome feedback on that. And then for the community-wide projects, those would be surveys or modeling that they capture the mode shift that happened based on a project. Next slide. So the count data collection timeline has changed a little bit. So The before and near term after, I believe, are the same. So we're asking for before counts, 0 to 6 months before the construction or project implementation. Near term after, 6 to 8 months after the project completion, and we have that range of time so that you can align it with the same month as the before counts, because we want to have primarily the consistency to understand how behavior may have changed based on the project. And then long-term after would be 5 years after project completion. Teresa, you had a comment?
So that the 5 year is what we're saying only for, whoops, now I'm unmuted. The 5 year part is what we're saying what for cycle 6 and later. So anything that after the
Yeah,
SB1 legislation, just want to clarify that.
thank you. Okay, next slide. So this table sort of outlines what the changes are between the interim guidance and the updated guide. So in the interim guidance, the recommended count type and method was automated or manual count from video. And now our preference is for the manual count from video, because that is what we believe is the most accurate. It For both versions, that would be 1 week. The previous alternative count method in the interim guidance was manual infield peak period. And currently, our recommendation for the alternative is the automated counts for 1 week. And so the duration for that, the peak period counts was AM, PM peak on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then a midday on a weekend. So the reason that we're asking for 1 week without exception is because that allows for much simpler and more accurate estimates of the annual average daily traffic, because you don't need to capture the daily fluctuations, the activity patterns at each site, and apply the correct expansion factor, which may not exist for any one location. And then for the number of counts, the previous guidance had 1 to 7 based on project size and some calculations. And we're just being more straightforward now. We want 1 to 3 based on the project size. And we're asking for better quality counts, and so more quality instead of quantity at this point. Next slide. So some other changes. So no judgment calls on the calculation or calculations for the number of count locations. We simplified the criteria for selecting the count locations. So we had maybe 10 bullet points to consider before, and that's been cut maybe in half. So the counts now need to be uploaded to the CAT data portal. The functionality isn't there in the system yet, but it will be by the time that this is put into action for cycle 8. And the CAT data portal will do the calculations for you for the annual average daily traffic. So we've removed all of the math and calculations from the guidance for how to do that, because it's going to be a pretty simple process for us to do in the system with 1 week of counts. And then we've eliminated the estimation of project counts. So you can average your ADBT or ADPT at the locations for your project. And that's what would be uploaded to or input into CalSmart. And then we're asking that automated counts should be validated. Okay, so I think that's it for my slides. And I see some questions here.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. So our first question comes from Kyle Wong. He asks, is there a maximum amount of the ATP budget that can be allocated to data collection? What happens if counts are taken, but delays and issues with the bid/award process lead to the data being too old?
So I'm gonna let Allie field that one, or someone else from CTC or Caltrans.
Yeah, it might make more sense for commission to respond to that.
I can jump in. So our regular guidelines say that, so if you have like weather concerns or other concerns with your counts, that you need to reach out to the project manager, program managers, and discuss it with them. And usually we'll just say, yeah, that's fine. You know, either, I mean, depending on how long the time span is before you can do your first or your last. But in general, you know, whatever happened, we're pretty much going to be willing to discuss it with you and figure out a reasonable solution. Because again, that's, you know, 6 months. We don't want to, the reason we put the 6 months before is just that if you do it, for one point in time, we were asking for counts in the application. And so we were getting that data. But if it's 2 or 3 years for that, there may be changes that, you know, there was a mall, a school, an apartment complex that was put in that suddenly that's impacting your front end data. And we don't want to be getting that sort of change in your numbers. So we want it to be 6 months, but we realize that that's not always going to happen.
Thanks, Teresa. And then I see there was additional question they had around a maximum amount of the ATP budget that could be allocated for data collection. And I'm not aware of a maximum amount
Yeah,
of
I mean,
data.
I
Yeah.
don't expect it to be high.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're talking about putting out some sort of guidance around how much it's going to cost. And so for cycle 8, I have actually already gone into the engineer's estimate and put 4 lines in the estimate form, and it's infrastructure pre-count amount, non-infrastructure pre-count amount, infrastructure post-count amount, or post-construction amount. So we're really wanting it to be on your mind. We really want you to capture that information. And you know, I think a project minimum cost now is like 250,000. So I can't imagine the count amount being a huge percentage.
Okay, thank you for that. Our next question comes from Iman Sylvain. They ask, I wonder if caregiver surveys could be a viable alternative to hand tallies for safe routes to school projects, or if hand tallies that represent 10 to 25% of the school population might suffice, as opposed to tallying every single class.
I think we do mention parent surveys as an option. I appreciate that caregiver surveys is maybe a better way to describe that. And I'm sorry, but I don't remember offhand how those were included, but I do think that those are a reasonable alternative potentially. And based on feedback from the ATP Tech meeting yesterday, I think we might discuss what how we might sample from a school rather than requiring every single class. But um, I, I guess that's up for discussion.
Thank you, Julia. Our next comment comes from Vanessa Guerra. She asks, can you please explain the validation process for automated counts?
Yeah, so we're going to include guidance on that. We have a draft of that that's under review or under revision. Um, so uh, basically, for a new installation of an automated count device, You would run a quick check, which is counting 10 of each type of user in each direction to confirm that it's counting correctly, assuming that you can see each user counted on the device. And then if that is less than 80% accurate, then you would want to make changes to how the device is installed to make sure that there's not some technical issue with how it's counting. And then once you have that 80% or better accuracy, we have a recommended process for conducting that validation. And it's more simple to do if you can pull per traveler um, uh, data collection from the device. So if it shows, the time or each increment of someone passing. If it only has bins for time, then you do need to collect potentially multiple hours of data to truly validate. If you're using a short-term count device, if you're installing tubes and those have been validated previously, then we only recommend doing the quick check. So the longer process, the full validation is really just required if you're installing a permanent station. So, sorry for the roundabout answer there.
All right, Vanessa said, thank you. At this time, that does conclude all of our written comments, but why don't we give folks about another minute or so to type in any additional questions, or please feel free to use the raise hand feature if you have a question or comment as well.
Hey, Jaden, can I make one additional comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alidor Westbrook, and I work at Caltrans headquarters at the Active Transportation Resource Center and also supporting non-infrastructure and plan projects. And really, I want to thank you so much for presenting today and for helping us update this guidance. But wanted to flag one area where we'd love to hear from more folks, particularly those that have implemented non-infrastructure projects. We've heard of a lot of challenges with before and after counts around that. So if you feel like you yourself have good examples or suggestions for us to share, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll post our email in the chat, or if maybe you work with partners in your region that have been successful in collecting before and after performance metrics for their non-infrastructure projects. We'd love to just learn more about what you all are doing so we can improve this guidance moving forward.
Thanks, Sally. Not seeing any additional comments or questions at this time.
Okay, well, if anybody thinks of anything along the way, please let us know. So I think we'll move on then to we had a few more updates for the ATP guidelines, the Cycle 8 ATP guidelines that we wanted to go over with you. And there's not too many more, but there's a couple items that we wanted to share that are new. So if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so those of you who have attended all of our workshops or who've gone through and looked at our past workshop PowerPoints, you'll think to yourself, well, we've already gone over the purpose and goals and we agreed on all the updates there. And you are correct. So as Alika mentioned, we did share a draft of the 2027 ATP guidelines with our Interagency Equity Advisory Committee. And we met with a few of the members and we received feedback from them. And as Alika mentioned, one of the items that of feedback that we received was that when we refer to active transportation users, when we define what an active transportation user is, our guidelines only mention walking and biking. So we wanted to add this paragraph under our purpose and goals to really highlight who we see are many types of active transportation users. And you'll see that is one of the goals in statute, which are listed to the left of the slide there. The last bullet point specifically says provide a broad spectrum of projects to benefit many types of active transportation users. So I'll just read the paragraph to you. It's not in track changes because it's entirely new language. So it reads, in alignment with the Commission's racial equity statement, applicants are encouraged to create mobility opportunities for all Californians. The Commission hopes to fund projects that create accessible facilities designed to be usable by persons with or without disabilities. The Commission encourages projects that contribute to accessible mode shift and facilities that empower people to roll, walk, and bike to their destinations. So I'll pause there, see if there's any comments, questions, concerns. Okay. Hearing none. So this will be added to the purpose and goals section of the guidelines. All right, let's go to the next slide. So next, I wanted to cover the section. This was near our section that talks about, in the guidelines, that talks about allocations and how to request an allocation and so on. As you know, tribal governments are eligible applicants to the ATP, and all implementing agencies that are awarded must be able to contract with Caltrans because this is a reimbursement program, and the reimbursement portion is managed administered by Caltrans. So the only option that was available for many years to tribal governments was to transfer their ATP funds to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or the BIA, or another federal agency who then was able to manage the funds for them. So we worked with Caltrans, and my colleague from our planning department, Bridget Driller, helped kind of spearhead some other options. So if you go to the next slide, Jaden. So this is going to be a new section, which is basically just talking about contracting options and how each of those options is allocated through the Commission for tribal governments specifically. So I won't go through all of it. So there are, as you can see in the slide, in the next couple slides, quite a few more options available, which we're really delighted about, because it has been a struggle a little bit. And we hope that with these additional options, tribal governments will be more likely to apply to the ATP. So the first option that's available is contracting with tribes directly, or Caltrans can contract with tribes directly. And there's also the option to partner with a regional or local agency. And then the next slide. And again, I didn't show any of this in track changes because all of it is new language. And then there is still the option to transfer the funds to either the BIA or the Federal Highway Administration, the FHWA. And then the fourth option is a Caltrans tribal agreement, which is something new that Caltrans has developed. And I believe that's the last one for there. So I'll stop there to see if there's any questions.
Not seeing any questions or comments at this time, but maybe we can give folks a few seconds to type out their comments or raise their hands.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next slide. We can always come back to this if there's questions. Okay, excuse me. So, another section that we had a couple updates to. So, we have a section called amendment requests, and where we list all the different types of project amendments that are allowed, including scope changes, our fund distribution amendment, and then number C is an amendment to segment your project. So there's a few language updates and clarifications here. None of the changes listed here are new policy or anything like that. It's really just to clarify expectations that the commission has had in reviewing the project segmenting amendments that we have been reviewing. So I'd say the biggest addition is really on the right-hand side of the slide, where we added a couple additional items that need to be submitted with the request. And these are items that we've actually requested from agencies that want to segment their project to help us review the request and come to, and so that we have all the information we need when we present this amendment to commissioners for approval. So any questions, concerns on this?
Not seeing any comments or hands raised at this time.
Okay, thanks, Jaden. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this section in the guidelines talks about the project reporting, and none of these changes are changing any policy. Really, the only item of note that's been added here is that uh, so currently projects that are transferred to the BIA, part of the transfer agreement is that the implementing agency reports directly to the BIA and not to Caltrans. And so that's just been memorialized here in the guidelines. This is something that has always been a part of the transfer agreement. And yeah, that's really the only change here. Any questions on this? Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the other item I wanted to talk about is one of the appendices. So this is Appendix D, which is the guidance for quick build projects. And as you all know, the quick build project applications are now only allowed in the MPO component. So this, the changes you see here on this slide is the introduction to the appendix. And so that's been updated to reflect the new policy. We did hear from our MPOs that they wanted us to continue to include this appendix in the guidelines as a guidance for any of their constituents that apply to them for a quick build project. So that's why we're keeping this, even though we're no longer accepting quick build projects in the statewide competition. So next slide. So I've not included all of the different little sections that are included in the appendix. There's quite a few more. I've only included the ones on these slides that have updates. All the other parts of the appendix are staying the same. Really the updates to the funding overview and time extensions are deleting outdated information and clarifying the existing policy. And then for the application requirements, again, that was updated to reflect that applications are only going to be acceptable for the MPO component. And since each MPO can adopt regional guidelines with their own application submittal requirements, the changes here really just refer interested applicants to look at their MPO's regional guidelines. Next slide. Okay, so that was it. Any questions, concerns, input on those clarifying edits?
Not seeing any comments or hands raised at this time.
Okay. Okay, so there are a couple of new sections and one deleted section that I wanted to go over with you. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so this section is new in the Cycle 8 guidelines, previous iterations of our ATP guidelines have mentioned different delivery methods in different sections, but this, what I'm proposing is to add its own section basically to talk about the different delivery methods and how they apply to the commission in terms of our timely use of funds and allocation policies. So those of you familiar with any of the SB1 programs, you might note that this is a copy and paste from what's included in there, and you'd be correct. So really, this is not new language in terms of what is acceptable or agreed on for commission programs. So really, this section just talks about different delivery methods that that can be used to deliver your projects. I think honestly, most of these probably don't apply to ATP projects. I think most ATP projects do use the design, bid, build delivery method. One note on this is that there is going to be there may be some updates to this section, and I'll just call them minor technical updates. There are some projects, mostly transit projects, and the larger multimodal projects that are either using or looking at using progressive design build delivery method. And so we may update this section at one point to add language on that, but we're waiting kind of to see what the agreed on language is going to be for the other commission programs. So that's why that's not included here right now. Any questions on this? Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the one that we're proposing to delete, and I didn't include the entire appendix, but this is Appendix C, which outlined the California Conservation Corps ATP program. As some of you may know, there was some legislation that directed some of the ATP funds to go directly to the California Conservation Corps to their projects directly, and that was in place for a couple of cycles. However, there are no new funds available to this program. There was not new legislation that was passed to direct those funds directly to the Corps, and so we're deleting this appendix because it's really not relevant for cycle 8. Of course, if new legislation is passed, we would bring it back to include in our guidelines, but we didn't think it was necessary to include for cycle 8. Any questions or concerns on this one? I'll just wait for a second. Okay. So hearing none and seeing no questions in the question and answer, we can move on. Okay. So, this is the part of our workshop where we can talk about the proposed kind of policy for how projects at the line, like at the end of the statewide and small urban and rural component, are programmed and how the savings are distributed back to the ATP. So next slide. So just as a reminder, and maybe those of you who were not able to attend our November 19th workshop, we had heard from one of our stakeholders, excuse me, that there was interest to redistribute any savings that were recovered from either canceled projects, lapsed project phases, or any project savings, to recapture those and redistribute them kind of in a way that would allow for the funds to be distributed 50% to statewide, 40% to the MPO component, and 10% to the small urban and rural. And instead of just basically doing what we have been doing, which is to completely fund any partially funded projects in the statewide and small urban and rural components, should there be any, and then redistribute the remaining funds to kind of the larger ATP pot for the next cycle. So in thinking about this request from the stakeholder, the kind of scenario that we CTC staff had come up with that could maybe work for this is to do a mid-cycle fund estimate that would redistribute project, any of these savings, so that we could still fund any partially funded projects in the statewide and small urban and rural, and then anything else would then just kind of be saved and moved into cycle 8, or sorry, the next cycle, the subsequent cycles. And the big change here in doing it this way would really be that any projects on the line in the statewide and small urban and rural components would be limited to whatever the redistribution is for that component. So with the redistribution of 50% of the savings to the statewide component, there may or may not be enough funds to fully fund a project on the line, or there may be more than enough. We don't know, because we never know how much savings are going to be available to us. So there had been some concerns at stated at the November 19th workshop. And I think before we kind of dive back into those, I want to take a pause here and open it up for you all to kind of see if what the appetite is in terms of is this something that you think is a good idea that we should dive into and put together kind of a proposal. It would probably be like a new section or new something that would kind of outline this process in our guidelines for cycle 8, or do people like how we've been doing it? Or I really wanted to kind of hear a little bit more from you all to see what you thought of this before we kind of move forward with a proposal for new language in cycle 8. So I'll stop there, and I hope some of you have opinions on this. I'd love to hear from you. No one? Okay. Well, I think if nobody has any ideas or opinions on this, I will take it back and kind of mull it over some more and come up with either new language for the guidelines to implement something like this, or kind of let you know if we're going to continue with how we've been doing it at the January 14th workshop. But I'd really love to hear from you all if you kind of have a preference of one way or the other. And or if you have questions, love to just talk about those. And if you want to send me an email or give me a call on this, I'd love to hear from you then as well. And I can always talk about any feedback I received offline at the next workshop as well. Okay, quiet group. I guess everybody's ready for lunch. Oh, okay. We got a comment or a question. So is the last sentence saying that MPO recovered funds won't go down the MPO provided contingency list? Yes. So the MPO recovered, like the funds recovered, the 40% that goes to the MPO component would not then be broken down further. Excuse me, my goodness. It would then go to the next cycle. It would not in this mid-cycle kind of fund estimate then be broken down further for each MPO. Like our ATP fund estimate shows the distribution, the 50, 10, 40, and then there's an additional distribution page that shows how the 40% is distributed to each of the MPOs. And so that would not be a part of this mid-cycle. Yes, that's correct. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Um, well, I think that's it for what we had planned for today. If anybody has questions about any other part of our workshop today, please chime in, ask any questions, or comments. Otherwise, I think we can move on and start with our action items from the workshop and then close out. But I'll just preface by saying that we'll stay on for a little longer. So if there's any questions anybody wants to ask after we close out, do our little closeout, we're happy to stay on and talk to you. So Jaden, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Anya. So thank you everyone for your participation today. Looking at our action items, I don't see any action items generated from our participants. It sounds like we'll come back after working on that mid-cycle savings language, possibly present that at a later point. Anya or Alika, did you capture any action items today from our group?
No, I think one thing we'll do is when we post this PowerPoint on our website, we'll include Allie's contact information, and then we'll also include can we include a link, Allie, for people to look at the guide and provide comments? Do you want to maybe talk about that? Because we're happy to also share that.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Anya. Yeah, so we'll provide a draft version of the updated interim count guidance as well as a comment form for folks. And we are requesting comments back by the 19th of this month. So that's a little bit more than a week from now. If additional time is needed, we can, definitely just let us know. We should be able to accommodate that request. But we'd just love to receive comments back from folks as soon as possible. And then again, just wanted to make another pitch. If you do non-infrastructure projects, I think that's the part of the existing guidance that we would really appreciate some additional feedback on. I think infrastructure project performance metric collection is a little bit more straightforward. And so if you have examples or just expertise in that area, we'd love to hear from you. So yeah, all of the updated draft, comment form, and my contact information will be included on the CTC's website.
All right, thank you, Allie.
Thank you.
Okay. So next steps, our next central workshop will be held January 14th from 9:30 to 12:30. The focus will be on the ATP application. The registration link is available on our website, so you can go sign up now if you're interested in attending that. And the registration link will also be included in this PowerPoint, which will be posted shortly. So here's our contact information. Thank you for your participation today. If you think of any additional questions or comments, please reach out to us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And with that being said, thank you again for all your participation. I believe we'll stay on the line for a little bit in case any questions or comments pop up. Rebecca Nylon says, thank you for hosting these webinars. Thank you for attending. All right, I see we still have a few folks on the line. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand.
Like most of our attendees have left, so I think we'll close things out. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.